Hi there guys, Ken here, your Thrifty Apprentice, and welcome back to the studio. In today's video, we are going to be doing another watercolor card creation where I will be using some new stamps that I picked up from Michael's by Stampendous. But before I get into that, I wanted to show you guys some of the water-soluble products that I actually use for my stamping and watercolor card projects. You've heard me say several times before that I don't really buy stamping inks, and the reason I don't is because I have so many water-based products that will work in place of those inks. And typically you can buy a wider variety of colors for a much cheaper price when you're buying them in sets of water-based products versus individual ink pads. And so really quick, my go-to watercolor paints typically are the Prima Tropical, which is made by Art Philosophy, if I'm not mistaken, for a bunch of reasons, mainly because the colors are really rich and vibrant, and they work really well on cardstock and watercolor paper alike, and also because the palette is really small and compact, and it fits on my crafting table really easily whenever I'm doing videos and making cards. I don't really spend a lot of money on artist grade products when it comes to my stamping and my card making, because let's be honest, it's not like it's commission work, and people aren't gonna keep cards for 20 and 30 years, so I'm not really worried about them fading or anything of that nature. So I typically just pick up department, or should I say art store brands for those type of projects. I have a pack of Master's Touch Fine Art Studio pastel pencils that I use. I have a pack of Master's Touch Fine Art Studio fine liner markers, and these are water-based. And guys, I tell you, I'm not the biggest fan of the Fine Touch brand, which is one of Hobby Lobby's house brands. Both the paints and the watercolor pencils I've used, and I'm not the biggest fan of them. I really don't recommend them. However, their Fine Touch Fine Art Studio brand, I think, is pretty decent. The paints are okay, but the other products in that line have proven to be really good in my opinion. I like their water-based markers. I like their pastels. I have not tried their watercolor pencils, but I did see that they had a pack of woodless watercolor pencils that I was going to pick up. And then I also use the Staedtler double-ended watercolor brush pens. So these are the different things that I use for inks. I use watercolor crayons or gel sticks or gelatos. So there are a lot of different options out there. And I just want to show you guys that really quickly. The supplies we're going to be using to make this card today, you've already seen the Stampendous set, which has a couple of different flowers, some stems and leaves, some nice little sentiments, 2 jars to choose from. And this card is going to truly be a thrifty card because I'm going to be creating this card from different leftover pieces of scraps, watercolor paper, backgrounds, and from projects that I've done in the past, both uploaded to the channel and not. So some of these things you may have seen before, some of them you haven't, but the whole point is to encourage you guys to use what you have already. If you have those watercolor scraps and those cardstock scraps laying around, you've created a bunch of different backgrounds, you got a bunch of different pattern papers and sheets that you just have lying around, don't let them go to waste. Go ahead and take those and cut them down and match them up so that you can put together cards or other projects. That way you're not letting those things go to waste and just throwing them away. I'm going to be using my standard pack of A2 Crafter's Closet cards. I always tell you guys I pick these up from the Dollar General. It's like 10 cards and 10 envelopes, and it costs a whole $1.50. And the cards are actually a nice weight cardstock. I have a couple of stones here for some embellishments. This is going to be the backing panel from a previous card uploaded to the channel that we'll be using. I have a scrap of watercolor paper. I think this is Canson 140 pound, and it's just a scrap piece of paper you see here that had some deco edge cut out on the end. I'll be using that for my stamping. And then I pulled out a scrap piece of my Jane Davenport archival paper that I'll be using in this project as well. So all of these are supplies that I've used in previous projects, and we're going to use those to construct this watercolor card today. The only thing we're going to be building from scratch is going to be the focal image. So I'm going to slide all of this out of the way, get set up here, and we are going to get to stamping and making a card. Okay guys, now we are going to focus on our focal image, and I did decide to speed the video up and voice over it because I was just yapping and the video got way too long. So I pulled out a few select colors from that Staedtler watercolor brush pen pack, that I'm going to be using, and I've decided on the biggest mason jar from the set of stamps that we had, and I just colored that up with a turquoise color, a little darker blue to accent, and then I put the darker green that I'm going to use to shade in the leaves down the side of that jar because I kind of wanted to give the reflection of the stem once it's in. I'm going to put the flowers I chose, which was the 2 yellow ones. I think they're like maybe sunflowers or daisies. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm going to be using that to stamp as my flower centerpiece. And then here you saw me just scribble some of the turquoise water brush pen onto a palette. And I used a wet brush just to shade in the side of the jar, as well as to cast a reflection of the jar onto the bottom, which would be the surface that it's sitting on. Now I am using a yellow orange and more of a golden brown color to color up the flower stamp here. I'm going to be using that yellow orange all over the flower, and then I'm going to use that deep kind of golden brownish color as my shadow color, so that'll go in the middle and along the ends. Then I'm going to grab a sap green color and then more of a viridian color to color the leaf part of that stamp. Now guys, you're going to see me do something really weird as this video progresses. I'm going to actually stamp each part and then color it instead of stamping the entire image first and then doing the coloring. I know it's a little weird, but I was off my game. Hey, but it turned out okay in the end. I promise it does. Here I am just taking a wet brush, and I'm going to drag some of the stamping color around and using some of the water brush pen that I've put on the palette to fill in colors. And I'm not coloring in the entire image. I'm actually leaving white spacing in there because I do just want to give the impression that the flower is colored. And we're going to move on to the stem. And the stem that I'm using is actually from another set. It is not from this stamp set, because the stem that was included in this stamp set was a bunch of 3, and I thought that it was just too bulky for the image. And this was a single one, and I thought it would work well. So I colored it up with the sap green and viridian shades, and I'm guessing that these are the shades of these markers. I mean, they have no color names on them at all, but this is sort of what these shades remind me of. And you will see here that I had some stamping ink left over on that stamp from a previous project, which carried below my mason jar. So I grabbed a little bit more of that turquoise paint off of the turquoise brush pen off of my palette just to try to shade over it. And eventually I'm just going to use some deco scissors to cut that off. Next, I'm going to be using the sap green and the viridian to ink up the 3-leaf cluster, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be stamping off the end of the watercolor paper, so I did put down something in the back just to try to keep my desk clean, although as we go on you'll see I don't do the best job of that. And after fiddling around with it for just a moment, I finally decided where I wanted to stamp the leaves, and it ended up being over the top of the jar, and I wasn't sure about the image showing through. But I proceeded on anyway and colored it in with my sap green marker. And then I'm going to come back and add in some shadows and shades with that darker Viridian color. And of course, splatter time always comes into effect when we're talking about flowers. So I used each color that was included in the composition and just kind of splattered them all over the background. And there you have that. Let's go ahead and put this card together. I'm grabbing one of the cards that I get with the Crafter Corners pack that I pick up. I told you guys, I think I told you guys, I get those from like Dollar General. There's like 10 in the pack with envelopes for $1.50, and the cardstock is actually pretty heavy. So using my Jane Davenport archival paper that I cut down to specifically make sure I target getting the yellow, I'm going to tape that down as backing. And then I'm also using that leftover background paper that we made for a previous project on the front of this card. And after cutting it down to fit, I just tore off the top part to give it sort of that deco edge. And then kind of went over the edge with some ink, and you will see that after I did that, I put it down, I put adhesive on the back and got that ink on my desk. It was such a mess, so I did throw down my backing paper again. And now for the focal image, I'm just going to hit that with some of that same ink just to give it a frame and make it stand out. We'll go ahead and throw adhesive on the back of that and put it on the card. You're going to see me also grab my scissors and trim off that hangover excess of card, just because I cut that Jane Davenport archival paper just shy of being wide enough. But I'm going to get that down and cut off the excess and then move on to stamping on my sentiment. Now, the sentiments that came in this set were actually really small. And I kind of picked up a trick along the way of watching different card makers. Whenever you have a small sentiment, you kind of stamp it more than once to make it stand out. So you're going to see that I'm actually going to stamp this sentiment 5 different times, kind of off-angling it each time down the side of my flower panel. And it sort of made it look like it was a completely different background sheet back there. I kind of love the way that that turned out. And then I'll move on with embellishments. I'm going to eventually be grabbing some of my stones that you guys saw I bought weeks and weeks ago. All those stones that came in that pack and those multicolors. Yes, I'm probably going to be using those stones on card videos for weeks to come, guys. So yeah, just kind of get used to the stones because they are coming. All right. So, but yeah, okay, back to being serious. But the stones are going to kind of go in each corner of the focal image just to kind of give it, I don't know, I kind of wanted to make it look like it would have been screws if I had screw brads or something, but this is going to turn out all right. I kind of like the way it did. So after I put down the stones, I'm then going to decide on exactly what I want to stamp on the inside. The Just For You kind of was universal and could have made it any kind of card. And I decided to make it a birthday card and use this brand new sentiment that I hadn't used yet. And it says, "You're not getting older, you're getting more awesome." So that made it more of a birthday card without it screaming, "Hey, I'm a birthday card." But I think someone's going to love it. After that, I grabbed my dragonfly stamp that I just got. Love it, love it, love it. I'm going to ink it up with all the colors I use in the composition on the front and go ahead and stamp it down on the inside of my card. And that is going to be what we call a watercolor card creation made from scraps that we've had from previous projects, being as thrifty as we could. If you guys love and like what you saw in this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Go ahead and subscribe so that you don't miss any other content. And as I tell you all the time, remember, just keep painting, just keep